Okay, guys, we are live. So this is for a video that I'm just going to shoot for players in my Iron Gods campaign. As at the time of recording, we're about 4 days off from what's scheduled to be our first session 0 on this. And as we're getting closer to it, I've had a really uneasy feeling in my stomach that some of the folks who may be in the game may not be coming at this from the same perspective that I am. And I wanted to shoot this video to just make it clear to everyone what I see as what game we're going to be playing is. And it's not to say that I've got any specific concerns about anyone necessarily. It's just that because we've got about half players coming from the channel who are familiar with how I run games and how I run other games, because the other half of the session or the other half of the campaign is coming from Paizo message boards. And I have only had limited interaction with people on the Paizo message boards, present company excluded. And to be honest, the vast majority of the interaction that I've had with people on the Paizo message boards has been overwhelmingly negative. I don't think that those folks enjoy games the same way that I do, in the sense that they're not getting what they're getting out of the game is certainly not what I'm getting out of the game and whatnot. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all you understand exactly the kind of game that I'm going to be running, so that there's no misconceptions, or there's no, down the road we don't find ourselves in a place where that you're just not satisfied with the game that I'm running. My concern for this primarily comes because regular viewers of the YouTube channel know that Iron Gods has been a bit of a white whale for me for a number of years. It's something that I've really been wanting to run. I spent a bunch of time converting over material from this to 5th edition D&D. So I do really want to make sure we get a good go of this. But I just feel like I need to make sure that you guys understand what kind of DM you're signing up for. Now, I'm just going to kind of go all over the place with this, so you'll have to bear with me. First off, the kind of game that I've been running lately, there's two kinds of games primarily that I've been running lately. One of them is the story games like, Blades in the Dark and Power by the Apocalypse type games, and old school games and OSR games. Those are like earlier versions of D&D and newer games like Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, or Adventure Conquer King, that have been derived from those earlier editions. Those things are characterized by a lot of things, including streamlined rules, but there are some ideas that are in what's called the OSR, or the old school Renaissance movement, that are just things that I recognize in the way that I tend to run games anyway. And those are the things I've really been leaning into, and I've been bringing out in all the different games that I run, including this Pathfinder game, or at least that's what I intend with it. Secondly, the story games is because I do like and enjoy the story elements, and some of the cinematic techniques that they have in those kinds of games. Those games, for me, there's not enough real game there to sink my teeth into. There's not enough rules necessarily to make it an actual game. It feels more like rolling a handful of maybe D6s and then making up a story around it, which is totally fine if that's what your bag is, but it's not really mine. I want a little more structure to it. But a lot, and this is maybe me just seeing the stereotype of the Pathfinder player, where the rules as written are the be all and end all, and that's just not how I run games. So I want to tell you how I do intend to run this campaign, because I think it's getting me a lot of fun, but I want to make sure that everyone understands what I'm doing. Now, some of the maxims that are included in the OSR that sort of make up that school are ideas like rulings, not rules. What is primarily, important is how the game is running at that table, at your individual table. Everyone has a copy of a rule book, obviously, but you make this fit for what's appropriate to the table. And that sometimes means changing rules midstream or making up shit as you go along. Now, Pathfinder it's very much like for old school players like Rollmaster, or older, more crunchier versions of games where there's kind of a rule for everything, and you can find a way to find how the official rules work. But I'm not really interested in running a game that's slave to looking up obscure rules. Like what I am interested in doing is trying to embrace a lot of the very cool simulationist stuff that's in this game. Like, I like the rules for holding, holding your breath, for instance, and I like the action economy. I think it's a cool mechanic. I like the variety of little tweaks you can make with your characters, because it's not something I do as a DM, but I like that you can really make the character mechanically be expressed the way that you want it to be. But what I don't want to do is have to, like, I don't want to be too fussed about looking up to make sure we're running a rule correctly in the middle of play. I would never do that in any other game. I'll just fudge it and look it up afterwards. And that's how I intend to run this as well, too. The Pathfinder Unchained book has some great level-based difficulty classes. It's also what's used in Starfinder and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That's probably what I'll end up doing for setting kind of rule of thumb difficulties for things sometimes. I also, because I want to be using, and sort of, I will see what's appropriate for a scene or for an individual characters, in particular non-combat stuff. I will often just make up skill challenge type things on the fly. Like, if your characters decide to flee from combat, we're not going to fucking model it out in Pathfinder rules, because that's just boring. But I do want to have, when you are in combat, embrace the tactical components of that, because the tactical depth of Pathfinder is something I think is very cool, and I'd like to embrace. Old school games aren't necessarily rules light in terms of combat. Just look at weapon speed and the initiative system from AT&T as an example. But one of the things I want to do to try and make the game a little more mobile, just as a strict house rule as well, now I'm thinking of combat, is I'm going to reduce the attack bonus for all attacks of opportunity by -2. So all attacks of opportunity are at -2. This is consistent with the way that Pathfinder 2nd Edition is doing it. I'm also going to be doing away with any feat requirements for any of the maneuvers, because I want you guys to be thinking beyond more just the optimized weapon. The thing I have found with Pathfinder is people sometimes, and this is what the mechanics encourage, is, the adage of having a hammer and everything look like a nail. You have your one answer to most things. And I'd like to see a little more, an ability to respond in the moment with non-combat or more improvised tactics, and not have the system penalize you for that. Now, obviously, you can still play your character however you want. I just don't want there to be a mechanical penalty if you decide to grapple with someone, or you try to, like, knock them down or something like that, rather than then do with whatever your optimized kind of attack is. One of the things that I very much embrace in the old school game is the idea that combat is war, not sport. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that when you get involved in combat, things are really fucking dangerous. You cannot necessarily bet on it being a fair encounter. So there are times when you're going to have to, characters will have to read the situation or approach a situation with a great deal of care to ensure that they're not getting into a combat circumstance that is punching well above their weight. That happens in OSR games all the time, and I like that. I mean, it gives to me, it gives the world more verisimilitude. Now, one of the things that Pathfinder does, it is not a particularly mobile game unless you're specifically building your character to be able to get around attacks of opportunity and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons why I'm fudging or changing the rules for attacks of opportunities, because I want you guys, if you find yourself, shit, we're overmatched here, we need to get the fuck out of here, to be able to do that. What's connected with that as well is that I will let dice rolls fall where they may. I may fudge hit points on monsters to either, if you guys are way overmatching something and the encounter needs to be, for story reasons, needs to be more challenging, I might fudge hit points either up or down. But dice rolls will just fall where they may, because I like that. And that's part of the fun, is for all of us involved, is the unexpected turn where I keep hitting misses, or rolling misses when my monsters, or I keep rolling hits when you think it was going to be an easy encounter. What else with the going with the rules and rulings aspect of the game, or of my approach to the games as well too. Part of that comes with a trust for the DM, that I know my job is to make sure everyone's having a good time. And I see this particular game as me running a game using Pathfinder rules, not me running Pathfinder per se. What that means then is that I may fudge things or make up shit on the fly to just facilitate whatever I feel is appropriate for the scene. And you guys are going to have to trust that that's what that I'm doing that to make sure everyone's having a good time. What I won't do, though, is invalidate character choices. I know that the decisions that are made to optimize characters in a specific way have been made with expectation in mind. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm not fudging things to the point where, where it invalidates the mechanical decisions and choices that you have made for your character. What else here? Story, one of the other maxims of old school games is that story is a consequence of play, not a goal. And this is less true. Pathfinder doesn't necessarily play in a way that focuses on story. I mean, like at default, there's no way to modify your dice rolls. Hero points are an optional rule. The mythic rules are an optional rule. So I'm not, that's not necessarily applicable to this particular thing. But what I mean, what to me that means is that the story comes from whatever's happening at the table. You know, to me, that is the most important part of understanding the game. We're not adventuring in a wider Golarion where everyone else, there's other adventuring parties and that are technically playing in the same absolute world. What I mean is that whatever's right for our story at our table, we'll embrace that. And those are things like, it's really, with a world like Golarion where there is so much detail on it, if we decide to fudge something differently or we establish something about the world, like say that the worshippers of Bry, I don't know, that they have their holy days on whatever day, or that there's a specific part of their beliefs that relates to demons, say. And then there's something in the fiction that is different from that. Well, whatever's happening in the story on the table, that's going to supersede whatever is in the official products. This may not be, honestly, like it may not be a big deal, but I find that this is the way to get around really established worlds like Golarion, like Forgotten Realms, where, canon for some players is, and playing canon accurate is more important than, it's not that it's more important. I shouldn't say that, sounds really pejorative. What I mean is that stuff, the breaking of that canon is breaking of the immersion and of the experience and of the expectations of the players. So that's not to say that I'm not going to try and do my homework and make sure I'm running things, accurately, but I'm going to make changes that I feel are appropriate for the game as it evolves. Every other game I run, we change things as we go, or I change things that I had planned to better suit the campaign. Whatever I feel is going to make for the best experience at the table, that's what I'm going to be doing. Now, it's not to say I'm going to be throwing everything out, baby with the bathwater kind of stuff, and that all your knowledge or pre-existing knowledge of Pathfinder is not going to be a benefit here. It's just that I don't want the changes that I'm going to be making to take you out of the game, if that's what your experience is. I know that Pathfinder is a rich and detailed world with lots and lots of years of history behind it, but I'm not interested in having to be correct on all those points, when I'm running the game. I want to run whatever I want to see whatever happens with these particular players in this particular circumstance at this table. To that end, for those of you who I know that there's 2 players who have played through Fires of Creation before, and either the second adventure or part of the second adventure, but I'm running this game because I love this adventure path and I love the world that it's set in. But my way of running it is not to just open the book and run it all the way through. I will be seeing where we go with it. One of the things I particularly like about this campaign is that the second adventure and the 4th adventure and the 5th adventure are sandboxes, and who knows what your players are going to do. At the time the adventure path came out, the Ultimate Campaign book and the Ultimate Intrigue books were not out yet, and I love those rules. I think they got a lot of interesting rules. I haven't seen them at the table, so I don't know how they play, but I love the way they sound. Similarly, the Ultimate Wilderness rules, I like a lot of the stuff in that as well. So I would like to try that stuff out. But if it doesn't work, we're going to pitch it, and I'll make up something that that does fit. Now, that's not to say I'm going to be constantly changing all rules for things. I'm going to try and make sure that you guys know what the expectation is for these things. Or if you're branching into an area where, you know, I'm not going to be running it as written, I will make sure I try and let you know. Or if I don't let you know and you make a decision on your character, you'll be able to change that. Like that's one of the reasons why I've said that you guys can change your characters. Pathfinder 2nd Edition allows you to change your feats, your spells, whatever, when you go back to town. I'm probably going to just do the same thing. When you're back in town, if you got a day or two, I'll let you switch out one for another. So that way you can feel free to experiment. And, you know, for the, there is half of the group that is really well-versed in Pathfinder, but for those not well-versed, you know, you can find something that's going to be a better fit for you. One of the things that I don't like about Pathfinder sometimes is that in the few times I've run it before, I have found that there's a lot of disconnection between the character creation system, which is very complex and lots of interesting decisions for players to make, and the actual play at the table. What's happening at the table and in play is not necessarily informing that second game. And I'd like to try and get around that by just allowing you to make those changes as you go. Because to be honest, like there's nothing that you can come up with in terms of a combo for a character or a character build or whatever else that I can't kill with something, right? So I have ultimate control over or whatever. So I'm not really concerned about it, about balance issues with that. And I want, in particular, the new players to be able to experiment. One of the things that I do have, this is just a rule at the table, is that no one's allowed to tell someone else how to play their character. Everyone plays role-playing games for different reasons. They have different levels of engagement with different rules. And as such, there's not a right or wrong way to play the game. If you choose to learn everything about Pathfinder, that's terrific. If you don't give a shit about it, that's also fine too. So one thing I will not be okay with is people telling people how to play their characters, particularly mechanically. For a game like this, what's most important is whatever's going at the table. And if someone has fun playing their character at the table and it's not mechanically optimized and it's a way that is different from the way you play, that's fine. As long as you're having a good time, I don't really care. And I don't want anyone else impinging on that enjoyment by telling them how they should be playing their characters. So just a fair warning. Again, that night may be based more on a assumption I'm making about Pathfinder players and not about the how things will actually play, but it's just something I really want to get off my chest to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. What else? The combat as sport I've covered. Yeah, and that's so. I guess the game, the way I'm seeing it is, we're running a game of playing through Iron Gods that happens to use the Pathfinder rule set. I could have just as easily used D&D 5th or Shadow of the Demon Lord or, you know, Scarlet Heroes or any other games that I happen to own. I really do want to try and run this with Pathfinder because I've not tried to run Pathfinder the way I like running games. There's a lot that I like about Pathfinder, in particular the simulationist aspects. Like there's so many cool, great simulationist rules that if the players are paying attention to it, I mentioned about encumbrance in one of my emails. I love the encumbrance rules in Pathfinder. They're terrific. They're a great way to reinforce the immersion for that particular game of like, well, fuck, if I bring all this crap with me, I'm not gonna be able to get through the wilderness very quickly. But conversely, there's other elements in the Pathfinder game that I think are that take me personally out of the game, and it's because the game is designed to be played as a dungeon crawler game first and foremost. What I mean by that is the wilderness travel rules and the rules for dehydration and starvation are fucking ridiculous. Like they're so, as soon as you reach 5th level, travel has absolutely no potential consequence. There's no risk to it unless there's some kind of awful creature that's out there. And I think that breaks with immersion. At least it breaks with the level of immersion that I want to have with this campaign. This game will unfold the adventure path as we go along, but I plan to take our sweet time to get to it. I mentioned to some of the players who have played through before that I'm intending to start this adventure differently than what's written in the book, and or at least in the module. And that's going to carry forward as well too. Whatever happens at the table, is what's most important to me and what I'm most interested in seeing. I'm seeing these adventures as a set of circumstances that are happening, and that your characters are going to pass through those things, and maybe they'll interact with them, or maybe they will not, or they may interact with them in a different way. One of the things that Pathfinder completely abandons from previous editions, and not from third edition necessarily, but from second edition AD&D, first edition AD&D, and older games, is the idea of henchmen. One of the I don't necessarily want to bring that in, but the adventures in Pathfinder seem to always assume that there's only going to be 4 to 6 players, and those heroes are the only ones who are going through, and nobody else is really going to be interacting with that. And that's, to me, kind of silly. So we're going to see how things go. In terms of the XP as well. I am not going to necessarily make changes to how the XP advancement is going to go, because what I ultimately decide to award as XP, because I do embrace a much looser version of awarding XP, like is discussed in the Game Master's Guide, for role playing, for non-standard encounters like the wilderness exploration. It has neat rules for awarding XP. I'm just going to see how that goes. There are more players than what the module is designed for, but I'm not going to necessarily adjust any of the combat encounters or whatnot. At least I don't think so. We'll have to see how things go, because again, to me, what's most important is what's happening at the table. So I think those are all my thoughts on this. And I mean, I think this is going to be a great game. We've got some really interesting characters, but I do want to make sure that the Pathfinder players that are coming to this game do have fair warning. Not fair warning. That sounds like it's going to be you're not going to have a good time, but that you're getting what I'm offering is what you're expecting. What I won't be doing is running something anywhere near like a Pathfinder sanctioned event. I plan to, what my intent is to make sure we're all having a good time playing what seems to be a really interesting game through a really interesting set of stories. But to do that, my fidelity to the rules of Pathfinder is going to be when it best suits the game, and that's ultimately going to be a decision for me to make. So anyway, with all of that said, if this does not sound like I really didn't want this to sound like an overly negative, or cautionary thing. I just know what I enjoy running, and I know what games. I know that, so that the way that, or at least I think that the way that I run games may be different from what other, at least certainly with what is listed, like the official way to go. Now, if the Pathfinder players, if this is exactly what your experience has been, that people will fudge rules or change rules as needed or whatever, then ignore me. And I look forward to Saturday morning session. But if this is something that it does put a feeling in your gut, that this is not the game for you, or you're not really going to enjoy the, what's on offer. There's an adage that, that goes around about dating, that, you'll know within the first 15 minutes if someone is the right fit for you or not. And this is me giving you an opportunity to do that 15-minute check and see if I'm the right DM for you. If I'm not, that's totally, that's no harm, no foul. As I said, everyone enjoys different things in the games. That's the stuff that I enjoy. That's the game I have on offer. And I'm just not interested in trying to run a game different than what I enjoy and what I think is, plays to my strengths as a DM. So anyway, that's my video. I just wanted to get this off my chest, get it off to you guys, to give you an opportunity to process this and make the decision as to whether, if this isn't the game for you, that's totally fine as well too. No harm, no foul. You guys were all lovely in the correspondence we've had so far. So, I don't expect there would be any hard feelings one way or the other. But if this is the game for you, if this does sound like something that's absolutely up your alley, then I am really looking forward to running this. I think this is going to be a really, really fun campaign. It is a great adventure path. It's got some really awesome ideas, some great villains. And I think the set of characters that we have together are going to be a shit ton of fun to see what is happening to them as we go through these adventure paths. But if it isn't your bag, shoot me an email. That's, it's completely fine. as in all things, different strokes for different folks. So anyway, if you have any follow-up questions about this, shoot me an email as well. Otherwise, I hope this finds you all well, and I will talk to you guys. If not beforehand, I'll talk to you on Saturday morning. So thanks all. Bye-bye.